Hi, Jesse Durham here with you, and today's subject is going to be college. To go or not to go? That's the question that we're going to address. Now, obviously, ultimately, you have to decide whether furthering your education is right for you, when it's right for you, but when you arrive at your decision, we want to be able to help facilitate that effort. So I can say that from my own experience, I have a 4-year degree. I double majored in both Spanish and criminal justice, and I highly value the time that I spent, the time and the history and the experience that I spent during those years in procuring my bachelor's degree. And I did even spend some time in each of those fields. I spent some time as a law enforcement officer in North Carolina, and then also in a high school setting teaching Spanish for college prep. But in particular today, we're going to cover some things to consider because there are many things that are proposed to us, promoted to us in the vast world, and then also how we could look at this issue through the lens of the infinite banking concept, how we could approach college or furthering our education as our own banker. So today, let's evaluate a lot of the circumstances, a lot of the characteristics that are involved. Let's ask ourselves, when figuring out how to fund college, whether that's for ourselves or for our children or just on down the line, because again, that's a multi-generational viewpoint that I just naturally arrive at saying right here because of my experience in infinite banking, because of my mindset with infinite banking. So when I was going through college, I was only thinking about myself. I was very, very, very narrow-minded in that way, and very inexperienced, very naive perhaps even in approaching the subject. I just knew it was what we were supposed to do, and I applied to a school that fit what I wanted at that time as a very young man, obviously, and not even knowing what I wanted to do professionally after pursuing a bachelor's degree for 4 years of my life. All right. With that being said, we want to be able to evaluate some characteristics about approaching how to fund college. So let's start asking ourselves questions like, in funding this, are we going to be taking on additional risk? Will we be putting up capital that is going to be at risk? How much control are we going to have over the banking function of facilitating this pursuit in furthering education? How are we going to address things like inflation? How are we going to address things like payments? I mean, getting down into the mechanical, there are many things that we're going to have to be able to address. What are the tax implications of these funds that we're setting aside somewhere somehow for? So there are many things to be able to answer after asking ourselves these things. So I'm trying to make us all think by saying certain things out loud, looking at the landscape of what things are going to look like for us, things we need to consider, and then give you some how-tos, give you some practical information to be able to put to work. When setting aside capital somewhere, we want to know that there's going to be protection on that principle, for one thing. We do need to know the tax implications. We do need to know that there's a system in place to be able to offset inflation. We do need to know and understand the tax implications for those funds. We need to understand how much control we're going to have while obviously minimizing the risk or even taking no additional risk. So these are the things to be able to ask ourselves and to consider. Now, specifically through the infinite banking lens is going to be very different than what we're going to hear and see in the vast world. In the vast world, we're going to hear and see that perhaps we should be investing or funding or putting money in a coffee can, under the mattress, in a checking account, in a money market account, in a 529, in a 401k, in an IRA, in so many different areas. And each one of those areas has its set of rules, has its set of limitations, has its pros, its cons. And that's what I'm just simply trying to get us to think about. Now, if we've read Nelson's book, How to Become Your Own Banker, Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash, The Infinite Banking Concept, He's actually got a section in his book about college and how to fund it. I would encourage you to read his book. And let's start looking at these different plans that are promoted to us and see where the limitations are. You know, with a mattress, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying let's think about these things. That's up for you to decide. What I believe is that when we know more, we can make better decisions. Period. And we'll all arrive at our own decisions. But it'll be based off the information that we have. So if money is put aside in a mattress, it's being stashed away, it's being stowed away, and it's breaking that natural law of motion that we've talked about in other videos here and other audios. That natural law of motion. It can't accomplish a job if it's parked there. It's not serving us, it's not working for us. It's not earning, it's not doing. So that's a problem. If we have something that's still pretty liquid, pretty accessible, money market account, checking account, savings account, something of that nature. I mean, depending on what time you're reading or listening to this information, you can see what the interest rates are and see whether that's worth having that money parked there, not moving, at the disposal of somebody else to be able to make gains and profits with it, because we've parked it there while we're missing out. So there's a lot of economic value added that we're missing out there. Even though it's pretty liquid, it's pretty accessible to us, we're missing out on the gains and opportunities of growth that others are benefiting from by us parking that money there. And the same could probably be said of the things like the 401ks and the IRAs. We're told to lock away the money, to put away the money, to not touch the money for years and years and years, potentially. Obviously, if we decided to take a loan from some kind of qualified program like that, there could be a lot of tax implications. So with all these things, and I'm not a tax expert, what I'm saying is that as practitioners of the infinite banking concept, we have to be cognizant of tax being perhaps the largest eroder to wealth, and we have to have plans that are going to accommodate our expectation there. So we go all the way to the very specific 529 plan. My question there is, okay, there are perhaps some tax-deferred, tax-free advantages there in certain situations, but there are a lot of questions too, a lot of concerns to me, such as, what if we funded this government qualified plan for years and years, and then we figure out that instead of furthering education, we would actually, as a family, rather be able to use these funds to pay for a wedding, to pay for the start of a business, to be able to pay for a down payment on a first home, to be able to pay for a honeymoon, to be able to pay for XYZ. Just the flexibility isn't there because, again, that money's been locked up, set aside. We can't touch it. Others are. They're using it, but we're not. So we finally arrive at the infinite banking concept, how to be our own bankers and prepare for college, fund college. So let's talk about a couple of things concerning the infinite banking concept that are going to answer these other questions. Let's start talking about, is it protected against inflation? Well, there's a guaranteed growth in your unilateral contract, in your policy that you have with the insurance company. There is guaranteed growth there. There is also, with a properly structured policy with a mutual company that's been around for well over 100 years, the prospect of a dividend on top of that guaranteed growth that we've talked about. So there's an offset for inflation, but the whole while we have access to the cash values in our policies. So if plans have changed or we need access to the money now for whatever reason, we have that flexibility. So the points of flexibility, the points of hedging off inflation, taxes, of course. Policy loans are 100% tax free. Let's remember this. Ultimately, wherever we put money, we've probably already paid taxes on that. Wherever we earned it from, gained it from, whether that was from a commission or wages from a job, wherever we've gotten that money from, we've probably already paid taxes on it. We don't want to put it in a place, I suppose we may not want to put it in a place where it'll be taxed Again, those same dollars being taxed here, being taxed there, being taxed there. So, considering tax implications, what are some other things we need to be able to consider? We need to be able to consider how much risk we're willing to take. I mean, just how much do we want to see our money that we are setting aside, in this example for college, how much do we want to see that go up and go down? Another point to consider is the limit that there may be on contributing to college funding, because there are going to be limitations with certain qualified programs. Whereas with a system of banking policies, we want to fully fund those as much and as often as possible, obviously. So we've talked about taxes, flexibility, how to ward off inflation problems, how much risk we're willing or not willing to take, having access. These are all vital points to consider anything that we're choosing to fund, but particularly college, because it is such a present and a massive problem right now. I mean, student loan debt is one of the largest categories of debt in the United States at the time of this recording, and I expect that it may be for a while. So considering what inflation may do in the future, considering how we may be taxed even more in the future, even with things as they are now, we want to be able to evaluate these different issues when addressing how we're going to fund college. And another thing that I would promote is that whether we're parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles, godparents, whatever the case may be, whether we're seeking to provide funds for college for ourselves or for someone else, if it is for someone else within the family, just imagine the benefit of the education for the education. Meaning, what a benefit it would be for our family to see us practicing being our own banker, financing our own vehicles, financing our own vacations, financing our own business purchases, financing our own college experiences, and helping set up future generations to be able to do the same. So that can be seen in practice by us, and future generations just start from there to where, hey, in our family, we finance our own educations by being our own bankers, by having built up a system of policies that are properly structured for us to finance whatever it is that's fitting our lifestyle or our business or our investing landscape. That's just what we do. So there's an education before the education. I'm not trying to disparage education. I think it's very, very valuable to be able to pursue furthered education. I personally do so. I invest greatly in my own personal library, in audios and books and videos and live events. There are many things that I try and learn and develop and study for myself, even as an adult, after having gone to a very traditional college setting and completed a bachelor's degree in a very traditional way. I highly, highly value furthered education. I just would rather be the banker to where I go to vacation just like I said vacation. I would rather go on vacation. But I go and get my college education or help my sons and daughter and just on down the line for generations to come get an education. But the whole while we're practicing being our own bankers and that education. We're not going in debt to a third party that's benefiting from all the economic value that could be added. A percentage straight out of your cash flow and earnings, your wages. Whether you are setting money aside in some system, anything from the coffee jar up to the government qualified plans, we're going to put those dollars somewhere. Now, those dollars can perform one task or more than one task. Those dollars can be in the control of somebody else, or we can maintain that control. We can put those dollars at risk, or we can ward off risk. We can put those dollars in a place where there are no guarantees, or where we do have guarantees. We can put those dollars in a place where we have or don't have all these various benefits. So again, ultimately, I encourage everybody to read and reread R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. I encourage you to check out other videos and information on this channel. I encourage you to email. If you have a specific question of something you'd like to see covered on this channel, let me know. if you would like to have something directly answered for your own personal situation. Love to be able to talk to you on the phone or receive an email. So you can reach me at 828-817-4223, or you can email durhamtalents@gmail.com.